Hello, everyone. How are we? Good. Feeling good? Yes. Sweet. So welcome everyone. We realized it's been a while since we've had a Laravel meetup. So me and Max reached out to Seb, who was the original organizer, and asked him if we could help out. And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So here we are. So Max, no, I'm Tom Somerville. So our goal is to kind of start having these kind of meetups more regular. Obviously, this is the first one in like 10 months. Yeah. So tonight we'll have 3 speakers. Max is going to speak, and we have Andrej here and Harlan somewhere right here. So Andrej is going to speak about automated tests and how to speed them up, which I'm sure we all know they can be pretty slow. So that'll be cool. And Max is going to talk about Telescope, which was announced at Laracon AU. Talking about Laracon AU, how many people here have been to Laracon AU? Put your hands up. Oh, sweet. That's pretty decent. Pretty decent. It's pretty interesting. Would you guys go next time? Would you? Yeah. It's good. So one of the things that I want to raise before we start is, so we've kind of taken this over, but we're actually looking for more speakers. So today we have 3 people, which is awesome. But if anyone has ideas on things that we could talk about, like we could do research and actually do a talk about it. So if you have ideas or if you want to speak yourself, like please talk to us or send us a message via Meetup or talk to us later, and then we can get that going. Can everyone hear me, by the way? Yeah, all good. Thanks, Ruben. Cool. So just 2 more things. Is anyone looking for work? Put your hand up if you are. Well, I mean, cool. So we're gonna have. Well, the next question is gonna be: is anyone looking to hire? So some people will come over and say something. So talk to them. Anyone looking to hire? Yes, Nadine. So she's just gonna have a quick chat. But if anyone else is looking to hire, come over after that.
Thank you. Hey guys, I'll keep this short and sweet, but part of the perks of hosting, get a shameless plug. Part of our goal here at Formation is to help our clients innovate faster. And part of that is working with top, some of the leading edge technology, great team members. And so we're looking to hire. We have a lot of projects on the go right now. So if anyone in your network is looking, we'd love to talk with them. Rob in the back, he leads up our recruiting team. Can't miss him. And he's the only guy standing there. And if you have any questions, just let either of us know, or Tom or anyone else who works here. Thanks.
Anyone else looking to hire? Do you want to come up and no one? Sweet. Then we'll just go to our first talk, which is Andrej.
Cool. Hey guys, so my name is Andrej. I work as software engineer at Cover Genius. Tonight I'm going to talk about dealing with database and tests, the issue we had on our current project. So Laravel out of the box doesn't really do anything about this. So if you just run tests, it runs on your default database and doesn't do any migrations, anything like that. So our requirements were to use separate database for test environment, run each test against freshly migrated and see the database, and to be fast. So, so first point is pretty trivial. You add test connection to your database config and add it to PHP unit XML. Then start researching how to do it the correct way in Laravel, and came across this database migration trait, which you can add to your test case. test case class, and it runs migration before each test. Doesn't do seeding, but it's easy to solve. You just add seeding to your setup method. And but the problem is it's very slow because it runs migration seeds before each test, which takes forever if you have some amount of seedable data. And so this is not really a solution. This is a pretty simple app. So I continued my research, came across the refresh database trait, which does almost what we need. It runs migrations once before running test suite, and starts the transaction before each test, and rolls it back after a test. So in every test case, we have a freshly migrated and seeded database, and it doesn't take forever. It doesn't do seeding, so which seems to be as a trivial thing, and apparently there is no easy way and nice way to include seeding without overwriting trace method, which is not really cool. So yeah, it seemed to be a trivial thing, so I started Googling and came across many people who face this issue, and multiple pull requests on GitHub, but yeah, Taylor said no. So I had to rewrite the trait method and just basically include this little thing here to see the database after running migrations. And this resulted in 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes on a pretty simple app. So yeah, I've just created this package today for everyone's convenience. If everyone wants to have a look, but there's not much to look at. There's pretty much few lines modified. I think that's about it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so could you just recap how you went from 2 minutes to 30 something?
Yep.
Mic's on. Can you recap how you went from 2.19 minutes down to what, like 30 something seconds?
Yes.
What was the primary difference, that you were seeding each time rather than dropping the whole
that,
database?
So this runs migrations and seeds database before every test case. Migrates and seeds every test case. This only runs it once, then it starts a migration, and in every test case, it just after every test case, it just rolls it back, the transaction. So it only seeds and migrates the database just once.
Ah, nice. Clever.
One simple trick. Does that reset your...
Take the mic.
Does that reset your seeds as well? Like if you modified the seeded data?
Yep.
Any other questions?
Cool.
No.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks.
Oh, yes. There's always one, isn't there? Is this it? Yeah, it is. Okay, so given that you're using, because I have to be honest, I sometimes get quite lazy and don't make very good seeds. Just on the seed topic, you got any tips on making, you know how so it's often with like transactional data as far as like you might be running subscriptions and things like that, and you just can't be bothered making up fake data for all that. Any sort of tips on all the things that you've learnt with using seeding a fair bit in your testing to make it account for a lot of scenarios potentially, or anything like that?
We don't use seeds particularly for testing. So our seeds are like user roles and things like that. You need to initially when you run your app, and you don't. We do in some cases like separate seeds for test environment and for non-test environment. But like I'm not a fan of this approach, but some people do it.
Not a question, more of a comment. Like at the company I work for, we call those fixtures, things that must exist in the web app for it to work, or that's expected to be there. So we don't call them seeds. Seeds is more like I'm populating data in, and we just, same thing, but we just call them fixtures just for a bit of context. So, yeah.
Which leads me to my next question. Because I always have this like massive tear in my head over exactly that. Whether you populate data that has to be there. So maybe you've got like a predefined list of categories or areas or something that your app works with. Whether by the sounds of it you use seeds for those, and I always have, and you trying to do them in no one knows how to say this word, so don't bite me. An idempotent way, I think. So like you can just rerun it, and you end up with the same data every time. But also sometimes people will use like a JSON file that's on the server and just make sure that is there through like an artisan command, and just use seeds for random data for testing, or even like through migrations as well. What's maybe your or everyone's approach on that?
There are different approaches on that, and like some people use seeds in one way, another way. Me personally, I wouldn't use seeds like after the app is launched in production. I would use a migration if I need to add a new role. I issue a migration for this, for example. Some people make seeds so they can be run multiple times. So like, yeah, there are different approaches, but like, it depends.
Question for me. Have you run into like creating migrations combined with seeds?
So that's the problem. Like if it's combined, like it can become messy. Yeah. I mean, some like, yeah, you might end up with a situation when you won't be able to run your migrations on it, like when you starting up from scratch, because like it relies on some seeds, and seeds are run after everything, and like things like that. So
you can the way that I approached it on an app that I did, and I still don't know whether I liked it, but you can make obviously different like seeder classes. So you've just got like database seeder, I think it is. But you in the artisan command, when you like go PHP artisan db seed, you can give it a different class. So I made one called like I don't know what it was. I know the one was called controlled seeder, and that like had all the controlled data. Like it could have been called fixtures seeder or something. And then the other one just had like a bunch of random shit that I use for testing.
yeah, one of the options.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions? No? Thanks, Andrej. Next up, we'll have Max.
Hey guys. So, my name is Max. Just Max. So I'm a dev lead at Cover Genius. This is my website, and also a GitHub link to the repository having the demo, which I'm going to go through today. Hold on. I just realized this is kind of on the left side. Okay. Right. So yeah, the combination of the slides and the presentation I'll post on the Meetup page, but you can go to the GitHub link. Cool. So Laravel Telescope. Who here does not know what it is? I believe maybe 1/3 of you. All right. Who here really does not know what it is? Well, that's even more. What the hell? All right. So this was announced at the Laracon AU, which was maybe 3 weeks ago. 5? No. It hasn't been that long. What have I done with my life? Oh. All right. So this is a really good debugging tool that was announced by Taylor Otwell a few weeks ago at Laracon. How many ever weeks it was, I don't know. All right, 5 weeks. I think 5 weeks is a consensus. Basically, it's a debugging tool. And wait, no, this way. Oh no, it was working a second ago. How do you switch it off? No, it's on.
Do some live coding.
Oh yeah. All right. So, what problem does? It's working now. Thanks, Tom. What problem does Telescope solve? So, currently, if you're working with a Laravel application, there's a need for third-party packages to enhance debugging. The best one that I know of is Debug Bar. How many people use Debug Bar? Hey, there's a lot more than how many people don't know what Telescope is. So Debug Bar is pretty good. I reckon it's actually a pretty good tool. Problem is, however, Debug Bar is pretty useless for API projects. But even more so, it's useless in every situation where you might not run code in the request response cycle. So something like a command or an event or a queue job, something like that. So it's kind of limited in that way, I guess. And at the same time, debug bar doesn't solve every single problem, although it does solve a lot of them. But you still need even more third-party tools, such as Mailtrap, for example, for email debugging. But yeah, it's basically made more complicated by API projects. It's not very useful. And there's also a lot of information that's actually collected through the Laravel engine, but it's not really used, or it's not on debug bar. And you see that dog there, it's kind of like, that's how I feel like when I'm debugging without any proper debugging tools. Yeah, like the amount of times you've got to like DD and then look at it through Postman, or like, God forbid it's in a queue job, you have to like write it to a file in a temp directory, and then you're writing in Docker, so you can't actually access that temp directory. Like, oh shit, where I put it? All right, got to put it in the Laravel storage. It's just like way too much effort. So in comes Telescope, or not this telescope, this telescope. So this is Laravel Telescope, right? All right, let's go through it. So basically, to install this bad boy, it's pretty easy. There's like a composer command. You got to require a package. It's its own separate package. And you've got to like run an artisan command to publish its assets. It's all very simple. Potentially, you might need to customize its config file or its service provider, which goes in your app. But this is all fairly easy. And in terms of storage, so the way Telescope works, it collects this huge amount of information while your app is running. It's got to store it somewhere. Where does it store it? By default, it's the database. However, the storage is configurable, so you could store it anywhere you like. This could be, I don't know, Redis, could be a different database, could be Elasticsearch, could be, I don't know, files. Wouldn't be very fast, but you can configure quite a lot of different storage for it, which is quite useful, as we'll see later. At the same time, you can configure things like permissions on non-local environments. And anytime Telescope updates, if it changes its asset, you can just republish them using the same artisan command. So it's pretty simple to update it. There's not much else involved. All right. So because this is a very practical tool, most of this demo will actually be me showing you how to use Telescope. Who can do that?
Me, it's actually me in the video.
Oh, shit. Yeah. Thanks for sending it to me.
That's all right, you're welcome. I didn't know how that got out.
All right. So I'm going to be switching between a whole bunch of stuff. So let's see here. So just as a bit of an intro, the thing that I'm going to use is basically an API project, because this is basically all I work with for a long time now. And I think it demonstrates the utility of Telescope exceedingly well. So basically, I'll run through some requests and I'll do some things and I'll show you what the result is in Telescope. But before I do that, I'll just very quickly explain these three things on the top. So this is basically play or pause. This essentially stops or starts the monitoring and the login that Telescope does. So if you're doing something and you don't want Telescope to monitor your interactions there, you can actually just pause it. I haven't really had any use case for that, but I'm sure there are. And this is the auto refresh. So what that does is just reloads everything every few seconds, so you don't have to refresh it after you've done something. So it's kind of like live refresh essentially. And this, you can actually use this to set up tags for monitoring. I'll just explain it a bit later on. Everything else on the side here, there's just different, I suppose, concerns that Telescope logs things about. So you'll probably be quite familiar with most of these things, or I don't know, the vast majority of these things if you're a Laravel developer, so they're all basic Laravel features. Cool. All right. Let's get some Postman going. Yay. All right. So I've got just a few requests here. I'm just going to have to log in, Just need to log in. So the first example is just a very simple request. Doesn't really do much of anything. I'll send this request. I'll swap to Telescope. Hopefully it'll be logged here. Should actually enable this. Might be useful for the demo. So as you can see, that's the thing, the login request. I'll just give it a bit of a refresh. So this is the request that I just made in Postman. As you see, it's completely independent to your actual application. So the request can come in from anywhere. It doesn't even have to be locally. As soon as there's a request to your application, code executes. This is going to log everything that happens. So if we have a look at this little eye icon, it gives you more details. Just gives you a little bit of a summary here, like the HTTP verb, the path that was hit, status code return, when it happened. And if we have a look at the detail, you'll actually see quite a few things here. So we've got the time and date, in application time zone, I presume. Host name, so this is just because it's running in Docker. It's not because I have some wacky host name on my computer. The method, so the controller, middleware. For some reason, this is actually empty. Now, as you might think, this is not actually empty. There is some authentication middleware that's running here. So just something to be aware of. As in, it's still in development. It might have some bugs. The path, status, duration is quite useful. Tags, and you'll see these tags quite a lot in Telescope. Essentially, various events that happen in your application might contain tags. So some things that I'm aware of are events, models, authentication. That's just what I'm aware of. I think there's a lot more, but just keep an eye on this. The authenticated user, so this is basically the user, not the person that's looking at this, but rather the user that made the request. So this request. And then you have some information about the request that might be useful for debugging. So in this case, you've got the payload. This was actually sent in a test request from Postman. You can see this information here. Headers, session, there's not going to be anything here because we're using JSON Web Tokens. And response is blank because it doesn't return anything. And if we go just a bit down the bottom here, you can see queries. So it'll show you all the, well, in this case, the Postgres, but whatever database queries that are going to be running during the request. And it also shows you what cache events happen. Now these might look a little bit funky. They're actually like kind of standard cache events that happen to do with authentication and configuration and stuff like that. So this particular request is not doing anything with the cache, but you'll still see some things, so just something to be mindful of. These are just default things that Laravel will do that are to do with config caching, route caching, like all this kind of stuff. Pretty simple example so far. Is this fairly clear? Does anyone have any questions at this stage? Yep.
Sorry, yeah, with the queries, does it show, what was passed into the query, as in what was being queried?
Yep.
Is that what the I was for?
Yep. So if you actually, so you'll notice basically anything that has this eye icon, you can click into it. So in this case, might not be super interesting, but I'll show it anyway. So if you click into this, this has the actual query view. So you'll see it went down here to queries from request. And here you can see details about this specific query. So you can see it kind of laid out here, and it does have the actual ID that was passed into that query, which is super useful. In some situations, like if it's a really long query, it might actually separate the fields and the inputs, but it will actually show them in every situation. And then here you can actually go back. So it ties back to the request where this query executed. You can click on this, you can go right back to the request. Really useful for navigation. Really good question. Any others? No, all right. Let's continue. Create a new post. So we have a resource, a model in this project called posts. Posts are made by users. You can have a look here. Post with a topic and content. Nothing crazy going on here. So this is an example request that makes a post. Let's send it. Hopefully it kind of works. You can see there's a bit of output here. So if we go back to requests, we'll see this request come up here. You'll see it written to 201 created. The same sort of information. You can see the input. In this case, it will actually have the response because there's a response. Once again, you can see there's a few more queries happening here. Let's click into this one. It's an insert query. It looks kind of interesting. So you can see an example here where we're inserting a whole bunch of stuff. So it has the fields up the top here. It puts the values last. So you can actually see everything that was inserted right down to the timestamps. And we can go back to the request. The other thing I want to show here is models. So it will also log model events. So in this case, we have a new model of post that was created. And you can see app models post, and it will have the UUID of the post. That's because it's this primary key. In this case, because it's an API project. If you have like an old style project, it will have a numeric ID. If we click into it, you can just see the same sort of information. You can see some tags here about this model, the user that was authenticated. Once again, the request that this happened during, and the authenticated user here. So this is a user creating this event, so to say. So quite interesting, getting quite useful. If you have any questions, just raise your hand or shout out. Otherwise, I'll just keep on going. So we'll look at a caching example now. So this particular request, it's not really clear from its endpoint name, but this particular request gets a list of countries from a public API. And not just a list of countries, but like a whole heap of metadata about the countries. So if I run it now, it's going to take a little bit of a while. It's going to go, it's going to go. Hope it works. It's a pretty long request. Wow, on my local computer it took like 5 seconds. I don't know what's going on here. I reckon the internet's slow. Oh, there we go. Wow, that's really annoying.
So is that error message cache now?
Yes, yes it is. Could not resolve coast. My demo. Shall we try again? I reckon it'll go like really instantly now. No? Oh, yes. I reckon I can make it work in 3 minutes or less. I'm just going to casually blame the formation internet and absolve myself of any blame whatsoever. Huh?
Maybe make the query more specific. Describe one country. Yes. Now his problem is that he can't resolve that.
Yeah, what Ruben said.
I hope that website just shut down this afternoon. That'd be great.
Domain expired.
Yeah. Find the direct location.
Yo.
network and it reached the bridge.
I mean, see, here's the thing. It worked on my local computer, and Docker being Docker, there should be no difference between that computer and this laptop. But if I do try and ping it, it actually doesn't work. What happens if I go to it in a browser? Do you reckon it'll work?
Yeah.
What? Why don't we just do a new window? You know what? I reckon the website is actually down. Legit. All right. Well, all right. I'm not gonna.
That's so brutal.
What are the chances of something like this happening during a demo?
Very high. Almost guaranteed.
All right. I'm just gonna skip this example, or I'm gonna pretend that it worked, and I'm just gonna talk through the rest of my content as though it had worked. How does that sound? So, as really?
Yeah. Anyway, all good. We believe you. It's going to show cache stuff down the bottom, isn't it?
What are the chances they ban my MAC address or something? Surely no one would do such a thing. All right, so let's say hypothetically speaking, if you had something which uses cache like this, so the first time you run a request, it's going to say it's missed, right? Because it doesn't exist. Now, the next time you run the same kind of thing, assuming you've cached the key, so let's have a look at one of these things. They're not going to be too interesting, but we can still see an example. If you're trying to use cache, and if it's actually hit, it'll say hit, and it will actually have the cache data. In this case, it's 1. Not super interesting, but hey, you can see it works. When you set a cache, you'll have a set entry like this. Once again, it'll tell you what was set somewhere. Maybe here nothing was set, I don't know. Like a true value.
You just set the key so it could check it.
Yeah. Oh, that's very annoying.
Did you have more further down or something?
Huh?
If you scroll down, have you got more from earlier?
Oh no,
Okay.
I refreshed my database just before I began the talk.
Okay.
So you say it works on your phone, right?
Yep. I wouldn't lie to you.
You're connected to the internet, right?
Hey.
That's what I tried to ask before.
Well, I'm connected to Formation Guest Wi-Fi.
What if you hotspot his phone, since it works on his phone?
Everyone just hotspot my phone.
I'm gonna hotspot my phone.
I downloaded all of them.
Password?
Nobody connect to the Wi-Fi called Russian hackers.
Never really heard of this. Have you?
Doesn't sound very good if it takes 5 seconds to respond normally.
Well, I think that's all that shit for all countries. Although then again, how often does like a language change? They can cache it, couldn't they? What would change there?
I feel like they've failed if their API takes 5 seconds to respond.
I'm trying to avoid.
All right.
I've never heard of it. But see, none of that changes really, except maybe population. But no
You could
cache that.
probably cache and then just invalidate with change.
Does your computer load up that now? Now try rest.
That's interesting.
How good's Docker though, hey?
I'll just restart my Docker. Maybe that'll fix it.
That'll be like 5 minutes.
No, it's already done.
Can you just return like a simple array? Like a hash?
No, that would be too easy.
We'll get this working, but
Hey, there we go. So, the learning here is if your internet doesn't work and if you have Docker running, you have to restart your Docker containers after you restart your network or connect to a working network. Just remember that, guys. If you remember nothing else tonight.
take that home.
The Docker is temperamental.
All right, so you can see, I think I already have it cached now. Oh, no. All right, you can see it's like almost 2 seconds. All right, if I can run it again, hopefully it'll be faster. Yeah, it's like 73 seconds. Hey, amazing.
72 seconds.
But guys, this is not a demo on caching. Why are you impressed? Like, come on. We've already had this. This is nothing.
This talk should be called caching and a bunch of other stuff.
All right, so you can see here, all countries. We're looking for all countries. No. We want to look at this one because look, it was missed here, right? Now it was set in the same request. Would you believe it? And you can see this is all the stuff that was set. Now there's a fair bit of stuff here. I don't know if you can see the scroll bar, but anyway, there's a lot of stuff. So it's a big request, right? But now we have it cached. That's great. That means the second time we look at it, it was hit. This is basically the whole thing I'm trying to demonstrate. It's not very complicated, but you know.
Green badge.
Look, it's there. Oh, wow, amazing. And you can look at it through Telescope.
Yeah.
All right.
Is it the load dash? Oh no, label.
Let's just take a minute just to let this sink in.
Can we cache our username and password request? No.
How is this cache invalidated?
All right, next example. I refuse to discuss invalidation of cache. All right, so here we have a request to create user. Now, this is a pretty good request. Why? It's going to be really interesting, trust me, guys. It's going to do so many things, it's going to blow your mind. Now, it looks very simple, right? Looks very simple. We're creating a user. In fact, what's someone's name here?
Max Snow White.
No, not me. Look, how about Ray? Ray.
Charles.
Ray.
Sting.
Let's see here.
Arnie Boy.
Raymond. I don't know what Raymond's email is, but anyway. Princess. So for those that don't know, Princess is one of the most common passwords.
Really?
Yeah, well, it used to be at some point. I don't know, maybe 10 years ago.
Password 23.
It's a very common password, trust me, I wouldn't lie. So let's just create this user here. So we've created Ray. But during the creation of this particular thing, we've done quite a lot of stuff. And I might just jump into PHP Storm, but I have to increase the font size. I don't want to use presentation mode because I can't switch between files easily. It's too much effort.
What editor stay the default you using?
Whatever's the default. How'd you guess?
So, are you using like some package for UIDs, or is that like built in now all of a sudden?
I'm actually using my API boilerplate, on which I will do a talk at the next meetup, maybe. All right, so we're creating a new user. This is what it looks like. This is just boilerplate stuff. Now, over here, though, we have an event. We have an event called user created. It's a pretty cool event. I like it. I made it myself. Well, that's not true. I didn't make the event, made it happen. But the point is that this event exists. Now, this event has one listener. Send new user email. And this particular thing, it just sends a new email to this particular user, right? Nothing crazy going on here, just a simple email. Let's see what it looks like in Telescope. Wait, what am I trying to do? Just gonna pull this back here. No, not this one, the other one. This one. All right. So this is the actual request, the top level request that was done through Postman. And you can see from here we can navigate quite a wealth of information, right? So there's the payload, headers, response. There's an event. Hey, look.
Click that hides the password.
It does. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Events, new user created. Let's have a look into this event. We have an event. Hey, great. Event data. Hey, great. Look, we've got a user model that was passed in. And we have a listener. So it tells you what listeners you have listening to that event. And we have one listener. It tells you that it's queued. We can't really click into here because there's nothing really to say about this. Just this event listener executed based on this event with this event data. But hey, that's pretty cool, right? Yeah, like I think it's great. It's pretty cool. But we can demonstrate a few more things here. So because this is queued, we can have a look into jobs. And hey, look, we have a job of send new user email. This job was processed using our queue. If we look into this, we can have a look at some job data. In my opinion, this shouldn't really even be here, but anyway. We can see the class that was used to execute the job, the method, just some information about it. Quite a lot of things here. So this kind of stuff is actually quite useful in my opinion because especially on non-local environments, you're gonna have this kind of stuff running from some kind of a queue. But locally, personally, I prefer to run jobs on Redis just to kind of simulate a production environment better. If you run things on queue, if you run queue jobs on sync, it's not gonna give you as good of an indication into how things are gonna run in production. So you can look through here, you can see again what queries are being executed, model created, the job ran, etc., etc. And this is really useful because you can't easily get this for a job that does queuing otherwise. But here you can get all of this information in one place, super useful. And one other thing you want to demonstrate, this is like a really cool thing. So this particular job sends an email, and you can also navigate emails through here. But just for the simplicity, I'll show you. You can actually navigate it through here. You click on this, hey, this is the email that was sent. How cool is this? Tells you everything in the class, who it's sent from, who it's sent to. Hey, Raymond. The subjects. You can download the EML file, which, I don't know, maybe it's pretty cool. And here you can actually see a preview of the email rendered in Telescope. How cool is that? This is pretty amazing. Look. Hi, Ray. And even this button works. Look at this. It works. Yeah. Huh? But the repercussion of this particular feature, so if you go to mail, again, it's here. The repercussion is that you don't have to use Mailtrap anymore on local or any other environment where you want to run Telescope, because you can just use this, and this is like way better.
Does that do all that funky shit like every mail client in the world does, and like strips things out and is inconsistent, or is it just embedded in HTML? That's the only downside of that I can see. Is like that renders decently.
Whoa.
What no, it's like Chrome or that's the outlook for sure. Yeah, that's what I mean. If it's just iframe,
I reckon.
The email file is cool because you can open that up with, Outlook 2001.
Yeah. I mean, you've got the EML here. I reckon this is just rendered using HTML.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But that's
it like
it doesn't emulate all this stupid shit.
Yeah, so this
Email uses stupid weird things.
this achieves the purpose of email testing. It doesn't test your email layout in every single email client. Just to be very clear. Oh, obviously. They should do a partnership with like, I don't know. Yeah? Why not?
As I say, there's a company for that, isn't there?
All right. So that's pretty cool. One thing to note, which is pretty important. So if you want to have Telescope capture your emails, you actually have to send set your email driver to log. If you have it set to anything else, it's not going to do anything. If you have your email driver set to log, these are actually logged to a file in your storage folder, and then Telescope picks them up. So it's pretty useful. All right, one final request. So this is a request which does an API call to NASA, and luckily this is meant to fail, so we can't go wrong. So what we have here is a dump of the exception. Now, why does this happen? I'll show you guys the request in Storm. So this particular method is what does it. So it does a request to NASA. I'm not a liar. This really is NASA. I just don't have an API key. Now, what this does is it catches any exception that happens to occur, and then it does a dump, right? And then it rethrows a different exception, access denied HTTP exception, which is an actual API exception. Now, what am I showing you here? Well, basically, by default, this is what would happen. Now, if you have, keep coming back to this, don't I? If you have Telescope open, if you have specifically the dump tab open, but only if you have this tab open, dump will no longer dump things to your output. It will put things into Telescope, and your request will execute as normal otherwise. And in this case, we get the error that we actually threw, the HTTP access denied error. So this was meant to happen. And if you look at Telescope, that's not Telescope. If you look at Telescope, you'll actually get the full dump here.
Okay, that's cool.
Now this is pretty cool because like how many times have you done a DD to, I don't know, Postman or something? You have to go through this massive blob of HTML. It's super annoying. But here it's like way easier, right? Way easier. You can see everything. It's pretty cool. You can see the full stuff of all the things and all the things in the stuff. It's pretty useful.
Why do you have to have that tab open?
Well, if you don't have it open, it doesn't pick up the dump. So this is using Laravel dump server to catch any dumps that are happening. If it's not running, dump will just execute as normal, dumping things to your output.
Is there a way to like not have that tab open and get dumps?
I imagine it's because of the size of the data that you'd be logging. Like you don't want it to be doing
No.
it all the time.
Like, no.
Okay.
So the whole point of this is to intercept things that you want to dump as you're developing, I guess.
I could just see it being really annoying. I went into a request and I forget to go back to dumps. I rerun the request and go, for fuck's sake.
You're gonna have to get into the habit of having this open if you're dumping. If you need, yeah. Like, just think of it this way.
It's just like the toilet, right?
Yeah. Just remember to your earlier years of life, you were potty trained at some point. So now, it's time to teach yourself. If you need to take a dump, open up this tab. Remember to leave it up. Dump. All right. Speaking of dumps and exceptions, so that's basically dumping. Now, this is exceptions, so if you have an unexpected exception, it'll be logged here, regardless of whether you're in this page or not. You can see an example here. So this is the exception of the thing that was actually supposed to work, but it didn't. So it's kind of lucky that it didn't, because now I have an exception here. I don't have to emulate one. Now, I think this is pretty cool, because if you ever try to log an exception to the log file, you get like this kind of mess that you have to look through. But here you get a really nice separation, so you can see the actual exception message. You can see exactly where in the code it happened, and you can see a nice stack trace as well. There you go. What a beautiful stack trace that is. Have fun looking through that one. Yep. What else? So probably couple of more things to show you. So there are a few tabs that I haven't really touched, but just because maybe they're not that common. So notifications, think of it very similar to events. If you send a notification through your app, it'll appear here. Now Redis, this actually is quite interesting, because I thought maybe it's to do with the Redis driver for cache or something like this, but actually no. You have to use the Redis facade directly through Laravel for things to come up here. So if you're on any interesting Redis commands and you want to debug them, I don't know how many people do this. Does anyone actually use, like, you know, L lookup and stuff like that? No? One guy.
Does it monitor your pub subs as well?
I don't know.
Monitors your dumps.
Yeah, that's Redis. Jobs I've shown.
Yep.
Schedule, yep. So I'll just have to, so in my Docker environment, I don't know why, but for some reason the cron job is not executing. So I'm just gonna manually run a thing, you know. Give me 2 seconds. I had somewhat prepared for this because I'm planning to do it anyway, so it's not gonna take too long. All right, hopefully this did something useful. Oh wait, yeah. If I go to schedule again, nope.
Yeah.
Maybe I gotta wait a minute, I don't know. Ah, there we go.
Oh, look at that.
So in this case, it's actually just a closure running a schedule command every minute. And you can see there's nothing crazy going on here. It just shows you when your scheduled tasks are in, I guess. And for commands, let's just do an example one. Alright, so I just created a new API resource, created like 5 different things.
Auto refresh actually worked.
Yep, so you can see this thing here, exit code, quite important. If you look into it, you can see the arguments. Options, there were no options in this case. But yeah, that's basically it. I guess one thing it doesn't have is the output. Maybe that's kind of on purpose, I don't know. Could be quite big.
Is there like crazy filtering and stuff, or is it literally just throw, like back in the commands tab? I was going to do the cough thing again. Back in the, yeah, so if, okay. Yeah, so like aside from tags, you can't like filter just generally?
Oh yeah, you
that
can. I'll show you how. It's pretty cool. You got Control F. But no, otherwise, as far as I
Did you
understand
just
this,
heckler?
yeah. Otherwise, I'm not aware of any
Yeah,
other
okay.
filtering. I think a lot of this telescope, I guess drilling down into specific things, is based around tags from the looks of things. Now, unfortunately, the whole tags aspect of Telescope at the moment is completely undocumented. So it's a little bit of a black box. Well, it's not really, like, it's open source, you can look into it. But yeah.
So from what I remember from Taylor Otwell, he said that essentially these tags are like your model IDs, or like, you know, if you have a user, then you can use that tag, which is, you know, user ID is this, and then you can see everything from that user ID. So if you have, you know, 100 requests from all these different users, you can specifically look at the requests from that specific user.
You can also create your own tags as well.
He says you can also create your own tags as well.
Like, you can go in here and you can put in tags here, for example, if you want to monitor them. Or you can attach tags, like if you have a model, you can put tags into a model.
Can you like tag some caching things and show us how you maneuver that?
Like I could, but obviously this demo would run over, so I'm not going to do it right now. But I totally could, 100%. All right, so a few more slides. I wonder if this is going to work now. Oh yeah, that's awesome. All right, so some issues and gotchas. So I've been playing around with Telescope for a few weeks now, 5 weeks apparently. So a few, just a few things to know. This is not a very exhaustive list. This is just what I've experienced. I'm sure there's like a lot of things, and I don't know, does anyone here actually subscribe to the Telescope GitHub? All right, well, I do. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. Like, you can have a look. There's so many people saying like this and that and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, the point is, these are the things that I've experienced working in an API project, right? So the first thing is, I'll just show this. So in Telescope, you can actually gate the use of Telescope here. But this so this user here, this depends on like session-based authentication, so using your cookies or whatever. In an API project, it's kind of not relevant because you don't have a session, assuming you're using something like a REST API. So if you want to use Telescope on staging, for example, for your QA team, you're going to have to probably whitelist your Office IP or their IP or something like this in here, in order to let them use it. Probably you wouldn't want the world to use it.
Because the request probably is.
Oh yeah. And so that's one interesting thing that I learned. So this is like completely pointless.
Can you pass the? But could you use the request? Will this get executed afterwards?
This?
Yes.
No, this is so this is not done during the login. This is done during accessing Telescope itself. Just in case it's not clear. So it's just guarding access to Telescope. Some parts of it are not documented. So like I said, tags and monitoring. Many aspects of the application produce tags, but it's not really logged as to what does it and how, and what the patterns are. This is probably going to come at some point soon. Redis is blank, so this is again something that threw me off, but then by looking at the source code, I realized it's actually if you're using the Redis facade directly to interact with Redis. It's not if you're using it as a cache driver or any other driver for anything. Logging things done in Tinker. So this is a very interesting one. Does anyone here use Tinker? Yeah, like it's super useful, right? So let's say you're playing around with something in Tinker. You're playing around, you exit, and then you look in Telescope and there's nothing. You're like, what the fuck? It's completely unexpected, right? So what I found out, so usually the way I exit Tinker is either through Control-D or through Control-C. Control-D is end of input for those that might not know. But in order for things to log to Telescope, because the way Telescope works is that it logs everything at the very end of a request. If you exit Tinker using Control-Anything, you actually interrupt the terminal session, I guess. You don't end the request. If you want things done in Tinker to be logged to Telescope, you have to manually type return false, and then you exit out of it, and then it will be logged through Telescope. So this was something quite interesting, because I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Now the other thing that I had, which was really interesting, I think I've got a screenshot on this, is that it may not log things involving very large data sets. And I'll just show you, here's a really fantastic example. So we have in our, this is actually a live application, we have a certain cache key which caches a huge amount of things, which is why they're cached, right? And if you were to look at this through Telescope, it'll say, yep, key hit, and this is the value. So it looks like a collection or an array of empty arrays. And I was like, what the f***? If this is the case, then...
I thought that's what you were caching. I was like, oh,
yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh my god, this huge request is totally broken, like we're executing it every time. And then I looked into Tinker, and I looked into the actual... I got the cache key, and I got like one of its elements, and it's there, and I'm thinking, you know, what the hell? So I don't know what the explanation is there, but basically, I'm guessing that it has a threshold of data size, let's say, I don't know, 64 kilobytes or something. I had a look in the config file to see if it was one of the things configurable, but I couldn't quite see that it was. But I think over a certain threshold, it actually doesn't save it to its storage. It just does something like this. So this is just something to be aware of. It's not a crazy scenario like it happened to us. It's probably going to happen to other people. So if you have a very large data set, it might not get logged. You might get something like this. And I actually saw something similar to this. Although I tried to reproduce it in like an isolated environment, I couldn't quite reproduce it, but I had a similar situation where there was a request running like maybe 150 queries, and it didn't log all the queries for this request. It logged like maybe 60 or 70, which was also, I thought, not correct. I tried to reproduce it. I did even like 500 queries this morning, and it logged all of them, so I'm not really sure what the deal is there, but again, just be aware that this is very recently released, so there might be some some issues with it, some gotchas, especially involving large data sets.
I remember in the talk
Microphone?
when Taylor Otwell was presenting it, they did say that each type of log was limited to 100 items. So I wonder whether that might have been part of it.
Yeah, I don't know because, so again, I could do, like I don't have the example in code now because I deleted it, but I literally had a request with 500 queries and they were all logged, like they were all there. So I'm not sure if it's the number of elements. I think it's actually the total size of the data set is the only thing that makes sense in my mind, but I could be wrong. Haven't really done a ton of experimentation with it. Only thing I can say is just to be a little bit careful. Don't get stuck in a situation like this where you're wondering, where is your data? Just fire up Tinker, it's really quick, and have a look. Just double check any really strange results. Useful tips. So you can filter certain entries in a service provider. I'll show you what I mean in one very practical application. So this particular package is using Laravel Dingo, and Dingo happens to run 3 particular events on every request. They're pretty useful events, but you probably don't want them kind of polluting your event logs because you know they're always happening. It's not really very useful for debugging purposes. So if you have any situation like this, you can actually put exceptions in here into Telescope filter. So you can say, in my case, let's say if it's an entry of event, and if you click through here, there's like a whole bunch of things. These are all the things that it logs, right? And then you can dig further into it. If the entry content is the name of the Dingo events for requests, you just return false and it's not going to log them. In this way, anything that you don't want logged, you can just kind of put it here. You can also use this for security potentially if you wanted to, but you can you do a lot of things here if you need to. But this way you can kind of control what is and isn't logged. So I think that was pretty useful for me. The other thing is you can change between the light and dark mode. So as you have probably noticed, I'm using the dark mode. The reason why this might be useful is if you do a lot of work at night, which I do like most of my work at night, you don't want like a white thing flashing at you. How do you change it? It's really simple. By default, I think this is like commented out. What I did is I just made it a configurable thing in the config. So I just added like, let's see here. Yeah, I just added this so you can change it between light and dark in your .env file. Very simple. Yeah, so I saw a lot of stuff in the...
UTC and everything breaks.
Yeah, there was like a whole discussion about this on GitHub, like trying to detect... Yeah, trying to detect based on the all sorts of like DST settings and location settings what it should be. And then one of the project maintainers came along and said, guys, this is stupid, we're not doing this. Probably they were right, like, yeah, give user the choice to do it, I think it makes more sense. But there were some really interesting ideas being thrown around there. I feel like someone could make a third-party package out of it.
I think there's a native PHP function to detect if the sun is up.
Really?
Yeah. Freak from Sparsi was...
Based on...
It's part of the date package, I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, but how does it know your computer's date, especially if you're running in Docker? Another question here?
Oh yeah. So in terms of like extending Telescope, can that be done?
Wait, they're not dingoes,
Sorry,
Huskies.
sorry, with Telescope,
Yeah.
can you extend Telescope itself? So for
Yeah.
example, at my work, we use SendGrid
Yeah.
to send emails.
Yeah.
It's logging emails. I want to know if there was a delivered status on
Yeah.
SendGrid. Can
Yeah, so interestingly, very, like pretty much every single Laravel component is bound to the app container. Very interestingly and inexplicably, Telescope is not loaded in this way. It's kind of loaded independently of the app. I don't know if this is on purpose or not, so at the moment the answer is no, you actually can't extend it unless you fork it and rebind it to the app. That's potentially one way you could do it. But I kind of feel like they will change this in the future. I don't know why this was done this way. That was another hot topic on GitHub that I saw. So, good question. A lot of people had the same question and were wondering why it's not possible.
It's been a while since I've heard a mic. Can you show us like how it stores stuff? Like you said, it's in the database, but like maybe show us a little bit. I'm curious, and like maybe even from like if you've got an app that's doing like a lot of shit.
You know what?
Not really. Show us the migrations. How about that?
All right. How about I'll do it at the end? How's that? But yeah, I'll do it at the end. Yeah, I can do it. I might start my dockering while I don't know. All right. Let me just quickly finish then. So it pays to have a look at recent issues and PRs on GitHub, because if you have a problem, chances are other people are having the same problem. This is what I found. Remember to keep your dump page open for dumps. We already discussed this quite thoroughly, I think, but yeah. Wait, do I have to? There we go. Telescope for automated testing. So this is one thing which I found really annoying. So if you want to use Telescope for automated testing, this is actually a little bit out of date. A pull request was merged this morning, which kind of allows it. But prior to this morning, it was not possible to run Telescope in testing because there's a hard switch that if the app is running in testing mode, then guess what? Telescope doesn't run. This was really annoying, so I made a PR to fix it. Should I show Taylor's comment? Oh yeah, I would rather change how Telescope works internally just to rely on blah 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 Telescope enabled. I asked him like if he has any concrete suggestions, he didn't reply.
And that's why people hate Laravel.
This is the joy of working with Taylor Otwell. Oh yeah, he did reply the first time.
It's a better reply than I thought it would just be no.
Unlike most GitHub PRs which I make, which is like 7 months later the authors reply saying, oh yeah, you need to do this. So anyway, so he rejected my PR. So a different user I saw maybe like a week later made a very similar PR. So he actually referenced my PR and said, okay, so here's the reworked version doing it this way. And the other guy that manages Telescope, he had a look at it. He was like, oh, we don't really need this. We can do this kind of with one line. So he just incorporated one line from the pull request, which was actually quite big and I think really well done. But they just ignored the whole pull request and essentially they made it configurable based on Telescope enabled flag. So if you have the Telescope enabled flag, it'll run during testing now. And the idea is that you can configure this in your PHP unit.xml. This particular GIF here, this is kind of like my impression of what happens when you give Taylor Otwell pull requests. If you haven't guessed this by now.
It's actually not really cool how they approach that. That's a different topic.
Yeah, but anyway, there are also other workarounds like changing your test environment name. And my last slide, I think, Telescope for production. So this has kind of been a hot topic. So basically in the Laracon, Taylor said that it's not really meant to be used for production. The primary reasons are it's not really designed for efficiency, it's designed for debugging. So it has a very high write overhead, has a high logging overhead. It also slows down your requests, obviously, because it has to do a lot of writing and listening to events and things like that. And then the second thing is that there's a lot of security and privacy issues. So there could be a lot of, well, there will be a lot of user data that's passed through Telescope. There are instances where you can see hash passwords, like in query output, for example, and potentially other secrets which you might not want to be logged. But it's potentially worthwhile for startups and other soft launches. So I had I think the guy's not here now, so I can say, I had like a guy approach me for a job like years ago, and he said, oh, you know, we're a really lean startup. Usually I have my customers on the phone and I'm fixing code in production when they report a problem. Didn't really take that job, but but yeah, like I think there are some valid applications for this, to run this in production. So if you have like a soft launch of an application, or if you're a startup and you don't have a lot of resources, it might be really useful to have that kind of granularity of information in your production environment. Probably thing to note is to disable the logging of certain things. So you can actually, I don't know if I can remember where this is. I think it's in the config file, but you can actually set what is enabled and what is not enabled in terms of listeners. So you could, for example, disable query watching. You could disable something else, and it might, you know, it'll make it a little bit more secure at least. It'll make it not as insecure. And then, yeah. So you have to consider all of these things, and if it's worthwhile for you, yeah, you can write it in production. The really useful thing is that you can configure storage for Telescope separately to your application, so you can have it right into Elasticsearch or maybe just like a different database, so it's not going to slow down your production database. If you have a Telescope right into your production database, I think it'll be like a denial of service attack. Yeah, and then again, payload size, one other thing to consider. So it's definitely going to slow down your application. And yeah, in conclusion, I found Telescope to be really useful. Does anyone have any final questions?
Yeah, sorry, back to the email logging. It's really useful when someone calls up and says, oh, I didn't get this email. Like, I like that you can export the email and all that, but...
This is in production we're talking, right? Not local testing now.
In production, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like it in those regards, but can you pull out information from Telescope or anything like that? Oh, and second question is...
Well, first question, so what do you mean pull out information?
How does Telescope actually store data? Is it through Redis or something, or can you...
yeah, so...
Or could you get mail to be in its own database, perhaps? That's what I was wondering, instead of having it with everything.
Yeah, so like I kind of showed here, so you can actually set up watches in its config file. So what you could do is make a third-party package, and you can put a Telescope, you can write a Telescope watcher in that package. So for example, you have the mail watcher here, right? So you can make your own mail watcher class. So you can basically copy this and make it do something that you want to do, just like, I don't know, log it somewhere that you want to log it. So I think the answer is yes, it's possible. Now the other thing, as I mentioned, Telescope relies on your mail driver being logged. This might be a problem. You probably don't want to log your emails in production. You want to send them to somewhere for them to be sent. So I think there are limits to what you can achieve with this. Your other question?
Yeah, so with requests and stuff, can you replay those? Is there an option to rerun them with that authenticated user or something?
No, I don't believe there is.
With the filters, is it possible to narrow in on one specific user, but also have it only log the requests that are coming in from that user. So if you've got it in production and there's a user calling up and they're like, it's not working for me, like works on my machine.
Yep. Yep. So going
Just so it's
back,
not logging like everything from every single user.
I think the short answer is yes, and it's actually fairly simple. If you come back to here, so this here decides whether it's registered and filters things. So what you could do is you can actually write something like this. It would be very, very, very easy. If you know what user you want to log things for, let's say it's disabled by default, unless you do something like auth user, UUID. So you can do something like this and enable it in this case, and that would achieve that purpose.
Yeah, maybe you can check. I'm assuming the incoming entry has a tag on it, and you could potentially check for the auth tag on that class.
Yeah, probably you could.
I thought that was what the monitoring was for, getting specific user data.
I don't know. I can't comment on that. As in, it would disable everything other than those tags you're saying?
In the Telescope interface, the monitoring tab did have the ability to put down, user ID equals something or other, and it would show you information specific to that user. Whether or not it was still logging the other information, I'm not sure.
So that's the thing that I'm not sure as well. I don't know. I suspect it still logs everything. It just allows you to narrow down, but I'm not 100% sure actually because I haven't used the monitor functionality.
Yeah, Max. Would that be a case maybe that pause button? So if you do have it running in prod, that you then just pause it permanently until you need to monitor down to that single user?
Yep, you absolutely can do that as well. I see no reason why you couldn't.
And that would just drop all the overhead apart from when you turn it on?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry, I'm just setting up the database thing so I can show whoever is interested how it stores things.
This is not like a question, but more of an observation of everyone's questions. Everyone's questions seems to be aimed to like, but I have a customer and I want this, and it seems to be all production based.
Which is quite interesting considering you're not supposed to use it.
I know this is what I'm trying to observe is that this is a debug tool, and everyone's questions and focus is mainly in production mode. So just a little heads up for anyone going to use it. If you're going to put it in a large scale application. Obviously,
it will just fail, I think.
Yeah.
Like you have to use significant filtering. If you have a production application, you want to use it. Sure, you can use it. You're gonna have to disable some watchers, and you're gonna have to put in some serious filtering around here in the situations in which you want to run it. And the problem as well is that you have to kind of decide whether you want to run Telescope or not before a request begins execution. So you can't like be an exception. Hey, let's turn on Telescope. Can't do that. You have to decide straight away if you want to use it or not. I think, it's possible. I think there are very good use cases for it, just because I've never seen anything that gives you this wealth of information. So if you have serious problems in production and it's worthwhile doing this, even if it slows down your application, maybe it's worthwhile. Yep, down the back.
Yep. Matt Stauffer did a blog post on Telescope, and he's got a great section on filtering. And one of the tags in there is if it has the monitored tag. So if you turn on monitoring for auth:1, so user ID 1, then it would only log those requests. So he goes through that in a bit more detail. So that might help you out there.
Yeah, if it's all right, would you be able to just post that in the meetup comments afterwards? I think that'll be quite useful by the sounds of things.
So we got to wrap this up. So this is the last question, and then Max will demonstrate the database.
Yeah, I think what we might do, Tom, is anyone that's interested in how Laravel stores things, just come up front and I'll show you, and everyone else just take a break, because we're going to have a break anyway.
What I was going to say. What I was going to say was you've got error handling, logging functionalities already built into Laravel, so it's probably wise to use that. So send stuff off to, I think it's Bugsplat.
Yeah.
And for mailing, perhaps extend one of the classes and then put your own logging stuff in. So you're only logging very specific stuff, and it'll be much more lightweight than trying to use Telescope, which sounds quite big. So much more optimized for production.
Okay, so we're just going to have a short break, which is like 5 minutes. Just grab a beer, grab a drink, go to the toilet, and then after that we'll be back for Harlan's talk. And anyone that's interested in the database storage, just come see Max right now. Thanks, guys.
All right, everyone. I can't whistle. All right, settle down, everyone. Okay, so yeah, I'm here today to talk to you about Laravel Nova. I've started using it maybe a month ago. Really enjoying it so far. I'm basically going to go through kind of where the admin kind of panel scene is at in terms of Laravel for the last couple of years, kind of the benefits and what Nova's kind of bringing in, and yeah, just take you through a demo application I've built to kind of show some of the nice features it has. I mean, to kick things off, like, who has had the opportunity to use Nova? Yeah, so not many people. It's fair enough. It costs $100, and you can't really demo it for free.
I mean, it's floating around the internet as zip file. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you really want, you can get it for free, but yeah.
Support the creators.
Yeah. So yeah, jumping in. Yeah, my name's Harlan. Full stack developer, just doing some freelancing at the moment. First time presenting. Have an identical twin, so if you see someone like me, it may not be me. From the Blue Mountains. Currently doing a lot of stuff with Nuxt. Yeah, Laravel. I still have to do some WordPress, unfortunately, and Yi for anyone who's had to maintain some old legacy frameworks. So yeah, this is me and Max with Taylor at the conference. Do I throw that in there? Obligatory. So yeah, why do you need an admin panel? Pretty obvious question to most people, but you never know. Basically, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's really quick for prototyping. So if you want to demo something to a client and you don't really want to spend any time on it, that's the way to go. You don't need to think about that foundational architecture because Taylor's thought of it all, or whoever's built whatever admin panel you're working with. Looks good out of the box, hopefully, and the authentication's all set up. Yeah. So yeah, which should I use? Laravel actually had quite a few admin panels out there. Basically, I've used Backpack and Voyager. Has anyone else used any of these? Yeah, Backpack. What do people think of them, like, in general? Boo. Just they're pretty average, to be fair. They do look the part, and they provide your basic kind of configuration. But once you start to kind of scale the project out, you usually run into a lot of issues. We personally used Laravel Voyager for a pretty big project. And found out the hard way that there was a lot of extra kind of rewriting of the framework that was needed. What's interesting is this quick admin panel. This is actually a SaaS, so you pay money per admin interface you generate. You put in your models, and it will give you an admin panel. Pretty weird, but yeah. Yep, I know. Had some good quotes on it. Who knows? But yeah, this is all before Laravel. Laravel Voyager was definitely up there in the market leader. And it'll be interesting to see kind of where that goes now. So yeah, what makes a good admin panel? I thought I'd just go over the basics here to get everyone kind of on the same picture. We want easy resource management. It should be pretty much you point to what you want your tables to be about, and it's done. The complex relationships, that's what usually kills you, because you scratch your head there for 8 hours trying to figure out how to actually get these kind of forms and fields to pop up. Maybe if you have a pivot table or something, actions on your models, like these should all be intuitive. It needs to look good. So most kind of admin panels do this, and this is how they attract people, that if you're a bad designer, just throw this in there and it looks good. Yep, snappy and yeah, easy, obviously. What makes a great one, kind of leading into what Nova kind of offers, metrics on your data, really important. Otherwise, you're kind of pulling in third parties, graph libraries, and trying to do it all yourself. Search needs to be nice and easy. Community is a big plus. And yep, why is Nova the best? Really easy configuration, modern tech stack. This is kind of what's pushing them kind of through the line. Vue.js, Vue Router, Tailwind CSS. Looks really good. It's very snappy. And you know, if you want to kind of build on top of it, you don't need to work with jQuery or Bootstrap. You're kind of using, you know, emerging technologies in a way. Anyone who uses Laravel Backpack. Yeah, and pretty much every edge case I've come across, Nova's kind of thought about for you already. There's many more, but I'm not going to kind of, oh yeah, here we go. Is the dancing dog in space, I guess. Yeah, I'll just quickly go over the concepts because I'm going to show you the code and kind of want to give you an idea of what these things are beforehand. Models, it's kind of like a one-to-one mapping. So for every model that you want to basically manage in terms of your CRUD, you make a model in your Nova folder. These models are very interesting because they'll actually use a trait called delegates to resource. And what that is doing is basically whenever you call a function or field that doesn't exist on the primary Nova model, it will actually call your base resource. So it's kind of like an interesting way of doing kind of abstraction. What's that one say? Yeah, all your code for Nova sits within these models, the majority of it anyway. So really you mainly just need to worry about that Nova folder. Fields, yeah, there's like a million of them, super easy to configure. Kind of standard fields that you think of, like texts, avatars, IDs. Lots of text here, but basically some good things. It uses Laravel's existing validation system, so you don't need to learn anything new there. Visibility is really easy to control. Computed functions are something that other frameworks haven't really considered, and Nova handles them very nicely. Has CLI for scaffolding everything. The date time, that's an interesting one. It will basically convert everything to the user's browser based on their own time zone. So that's another thing you don't need to worry about, and kind of one of them common edge cases that you'll come across. Yep, you can really easily spin up kind of Vue.js components to do anything custom. There's no way to kind of put in custom CSS though, just on the model, on the field itself. Cards and metrics, pretty basic. Basically,
Oh, it's depressing.
yeah.
Jets
Malaysia Airlines.
I'll show what them numbers are after. But yeah, your cards and metrics, you can apply them, you can put them on any screen. Again, something that other frameworks haven't really put much thought into. Really easy, and you can either bind them to like a model, you can bind them to certain screens, whatever you need. Filters, this is like your standard filters on any kind of CRUD table. This is done a little different in that it's not on the column level, it's kind of you just have one button that kind of opens everything. And it's kind of a little bit limited in the filters you have. It's just select a Boolean and a date. Lenses. This is an interesting concept that I haven't actually seen anywhere else. Basically, it's like if you had a model of users and you want to find who maybe was the most active user, you'd build a lens to kind of highlight that data better than maybe if you were just manually filtering, or as opposed to kind of creating a new table, a new model to show that off. Very useful for reporting. Actions, these are pretty cool. Very easy to configure again. Every action you perform, Nova will log for you.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah.
It should be crash flight, not flight crash.
It should be.
Verbs. Or
You can submit a pull request. Actions being queued. That's just you just give it that queuable trait, and then everything will be queued up. This is a really good website. Basically, the community's already started reacting to Nova, and pretty much, anything Nova itself hasn't covered. This website here has pretty much everything you need. So I personally use the backup tool, which is pretty nifty. The Excel, which just lets you kind of export all your data into an Excel.
This is
with a
like
button.
a marketplace for add-ons?
It is a marketplace, but everything's free at the moment, as far as I know.
Is it because you can't charge for it?
I guess it's probably because there's not that many people using it so far, so they're just trying to grow it a bit. These are like the most popular. Most packages have like no stars, like 90% of them. Yeah, let's get building. So basically, I made a little kind of app as the use case, which is like with the Nova theme, where a space shuttle kind of trips between planets, and they just want to manage the flights, spacecrafts, passengers. So the real to kind of build this without an admin panel would be kind of really annoying. But using Nova, super easy. So I'll go over kind of the steps. If I can connect again. I'm just going to switch off the other mode because it's going to be annoying for live coding. Okay, so I have installed Nova. It's just a composer package you pull in. There's not much configuration you need. Out of the box, it'll give you kind of this nice login form. You get in there. It's great. Username and password. Ignore that one. That's where I got the nice picture from, by the way. So yeah, I've kind of bootstrapped this with some models to go with it. I have a flight model, passenger, spacecraft, and then just the admin one, so I could actually log in. I'll give you a quick kind of look at what that actually looks like. I'm just gonna get out of this mode. Come on. Oh, in the wrong one. So if I pull up my database, yeah, I can see we have spacecraft, it's got a picture, we got capacity, location, we have flights, just some basic information about when it's leaving, kind of when it's arriving, the status, weather conditions, and the passengers. Yeah, just some kind of date of birth. So we're going to make fields for all these and kind of make sure we can edit them. So if we were delivering this to a client, we want to make sure that we don't just give them like pretty much what I'm looking at now. We want to give them something nice to work with. Okay, so here we are. So we'll start with our spacecraft. So we have some lovely IDs here, not really doing much. If we come back to the editor, we can see here, these are our Nova classes, as well as actions, filters, lenses, metrics. But at the moment, we're just worrying about their models. And these are kind of your standard Laravel models. So just opening up spacecraft. There's nothing going on here. Opening up the Nova one, what we're doing is we're mapping the model to our Laravel one, and as I said before, it's using that delegate function. So any kind of fields or any functions we call in this class will actually be ran in that eloquent model. So you will appreciate that if once you start playing with it. Title, search, we won't worry about for now. So I've kind of pre-written this code just to make sure that my demo actually works. Preparation is key, Max. So what we have here is an avatar, just a text for the name, oops, a place, and a number. So let's see what that looks like. So this is what it looks like before. Okay, beautiful. So some columns, that's nice. Avatar, that's turned it into like a nice little circle image. Pretty cool. When we search for it as well, it's going to have that icon for us. So that. I haven't done anything out of the box besides just setting that field. If we go to view it, yep, we can see that's nice, standard kind of form. Over here, the location, this is an interesting one, actually uses the Agolia service out of the box, which is free. So this is autocomplete. So anytime you use a place filter, place field, sorry, you'll get this nice autocomplete, which is very handy. And you can, it's same kind of Google Map features, you can kind of restrict it to certain areas or whatever. I'm not sure why this says AMP. I don't know what's going on there. I think that's the latest Nova. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure it's a bug in it. Whoa, okay. That was probably me. That's all right, because it still worked. We can ignore that error. Yeah. So before I go any further, I'll just kind of point out just the two other files that you would need within Nova. I'm going to go back into presentation mode.
Unless the client notices.
Oh yeah, Bax, by the way, if you want to see your files, you click that. Okay, so yeah, this is your config, your name of the application, where you want it. So typically this would be like /admin or something. I've just stuck it on the web root for simplicity. Paths, self-explanatory, and kind of any middleware or kind of authentication you want when people sign in. And then it's just a simple provider. This is kind of general Nova settings. So saying you want people to be able to log in, reset their password, any global cards. So this help thing, this is actually that, that dashboard. So you can chuck anything you want in that dashboard. It's just a card you make. Tools, register, nothing crazy. So going back to the demo, we have passengers. So if we look at a passenger at the moment, not too much going on again. We just have IDs. So we want to make that a bit more interesting. So I'm going to comment that one out. We're going to have their pictures. This field here, this is a computed property, and this demos a few concepts. So name is not a field that belongs to that model, but it is a column I'd like to display on that table. So I can just chuck it in there, and using a function, I can tell Nova what that output should actually look like. So you can stick anything here that is a view, and it will just work like that. And so I don't have any function on this called full name, that is using the function from this class. So what else do we have here? Just some names. You can see how kind of the rules are working and how to sort the columns. So if we refresh that, cool. Yeah, it's looking a bit nicer. If we go to edit a user now, yep, a bit of a blurry image, but you can go in, you can change it to whatever. You can change the name. The country field will give you every country, so you don't need to pull in a third-party library.
Use rest countries, don't you?
Yeah, you don't need to use rest countries. And what's good as well is like this kind of nice day picker. So that's cool. But what we really care about is our flights. We're gonna have a nice flight screen. So coming into this, again, we have nothing. We just have an ID. So let's start uncommenting some of these fields. So yeah, we're gonna have a real ID. We're gonna have some more kind of computed functions. This one's a big one. What this is going to give us is a computed function again, and this one, not only is it kind of generating its own content, but it's pulling in a view, which I don't actually have in this scope, but it's just a blade file. So what that looks like, just them fields there. So yeah. So that blade file is just a bit of styling. I've just used Tailwind CSS to kind of give them numbers, a bit of emphasis. So it's pretty useless without actually seeing which flight we're looking at. So we'll use the spacecraft relation field. So each flight has a spacecraft, and we're kind of going to show that in that index. And what that looks like, what that actually is resolving to is on the flight model, you need to have a function called spacecraft, which is your relation. So all it's trying to do whenever you pass in this label is it's going to try and find the appropriate field or function for it. So I'm going to pull that across. There we go. Nice. Okay. So yep, that's good. We've added our spacecraft, so let's have a look. Cool, we know who's who. So what else can we add here? We want to know which passengers are on that flight. So this is a belongs to many. Naturally, you wouldn't get this on that index field because it doesn't really make sense. So if I was to reload that, we won't see anything. And when we go into the flight itself, this is when we'll see that relation. So here we can see all the passengers on that flight, and then we can actually attach existing passengers just like that. Yeah. So this is yeah. You can fix this just by going into your passenger, into that passenger file. And the one thing I forgot here is to set a title, and I can't type. It's not static, is it? So in this case, you could return anything, or you can use that parent function again.
Full name?
Yeah, full name was it? Thanks. Hopefully that works. I didn't actually anticipate that happening, so. Okay, I broke it, so. Oh, there we go. Yeah, just had to load them. So this actually uses kind of Ajax to pull them in. Yeah, good. So that's good. We have our passengers on there. we kind of get a bit more information about our flight.
Did I go to card today?
So back over here, let's show a status. So this is actually using the status field, which is actually made for the queued actions, but you can use it for whatever you want. So I'm gonna just show which flights kind of crashed, what's preparing, traveling. Let's have a look what that looks like. So yeah, nice. Red for crashed, and we can see like all the other ones are kind of loading and doing their thing. So that's nice. This is just a kind of HTML form. We'll throw in some kind of basic information here. One thing to note is that the date time field actually uses moment.js. So keep that in mind when you're using the format function, because this is not a PHP date time format. Yeah, you wouldn't think it. Just forgot a bracket there. So now we have pretty much all the data we want. So yeah, we know where they're leaving, departing, arrival. Nice, so that's cool. But we're not really doing much with this data, we're just kind of looking at it. I'll just quickly show you.
What did I miss? What a great paragraph.
Yeah. Thank you, Faker. So yeah, this is just kind of that Twix field you get. It's just a kind of HTML WYSIWYG, as you'd expect.
Where did she get this?
It's Faker real text.
Is that right?
Yeah. So you can see here, this actually transformed this departure time into my local time zone, which is pretty handy. Okay. So yeah, that's all well and good. That's like pretty much every other admin panel do that. So whatever. Let's see some other things. So I'm going to create a card here, and what that looks like is I want to calculate basically, what was this one for? Which spaceship's doing the most flights? So as you can see, it's just a query basically, and if I return to that flight, this one, it's just in this cards function. So I reload that. Okay, nice. So we got a little graph here. So we can see, well, they're all exactly equal. So I guess that's interesting. Interesting of the CEDA. So maybe you want to see where the flight statuses are. So that's another one there.
Is this a prediction of the future?
Yep. So we can actually see 26% of them crash. So that's probably not good. Probably not doing something right there. Let's have a look at the other ones here. So passenger count. This one is, again, just kind of counting something. Let's find out.
So only on the detail page.
Yeah, so I've registered all these cards. Actually, no, I've registered this card on the detail page, as kindly mentioned. So I can just quickly see I have 40 passengers on this flight instead of kind of clicking through all these, even though it says it here. But this will give you kind of historical data as well, which I don't have because I didn't set it up in the CEDA. And best for last, let's have a look in flight departing days. So I want to know roughly kind of when these flights are going out. So I'm going to apply a metric class, which in this case is a trend. And very simple, you're just counting based on some field. So in this case, I'm counting based on that departure time. And there we go. So I know exactly kind of when things are leaving, and I can change the date, kind of the days of when they're leaving, and I know exactly what's going on. So that's pretty cool. I like that feature. Then yeah, we have some actions. Let's crash some flights, or crash some flights. So maybe I want to select just a couple of them. I'll ruin my demo, but I'll just select 3. So all your actions will appear here. They can be kind of anything you want. They can run in a queue. They can have a confirm dialog. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to crash them. So there we go. They're crashed. Pew, pew. And yeah, hopefully these numbers up here. Oh, these are actually cached for X amount of minutes because the queries tend to be expensive. But you can change their caching term to whatever. So what else can we do? Let's apply a filter. Say we only want to see, let's just have a look at those flights that crashed, I reckon. Let's see what's happening there. Nice. So very easy. That's again, you're just kind of selecting which filter you want, and you're just modifying that eloquent query. So in this case, I'm saying whatever they click as the value, just set the status to that. And lenses, so that kind of weird thing I was talking about before, we can see that demonstrated now. So we can see here, this kind of lens, and this will list everything you've registered to it. So if I want to see which flights have the most passengers, I can go into that one. And yeah, this is a whole separate kind of table. You can register whatever fields you want on it. If I was to go into that class, we can see basically I have, yeah, that query in there, which is doing some crazy stuff. And then, yeah, the fields again. So any fields you used previously, you can use here again and build, however many tables or kind of fields that you want to put in there. And actually you can apply filters. You can do pretty much everything you can do in that index on these lenses. Yeah, so I didn't have time to go over all the features of Nova. There is a lot of them. So this is kind of just an introduction. A big thing I haven't touched on is the tooling. So you can register tools to do your own kind of resources. You can make them do whatever. So maybe if you want to, for instance, have database backups, that's a tool that you can use within Nova. Yeah, if you want to search, if you want to change the search fields of one of them Nova fields, Nova models, sorry, you can do it. When I put it spacecraft. So yeah, you can just go in here and put in whatever, and then it'll start searching on it. So this uses Laravel's Scout, I believe, in the back end. So one of the big benefits of using Nova is that it's leveraging all this existing Laravel infrastructure that we're kind of all familiar with. So you're not learning anything terribly new. It's just kind of these basic, everything within this folder. If you can kind of learn them, then you're an expert at Nova, and you can do everything you need to. The next step is kind of customizing Nova, and that's pretty easy as well, as long as you know Vue.js. Yeah, straightforward. And yeah, I mean that's everything I had to say. Was there any questions on that?
Yeah, can you search relationships?
I lost the screen. Can you search relations? It's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. It would probably not, to be honest. you'd be searching a pivot table or something, I'd imagine.
For example, like you might want to, let's say you have a list of persons and you want to type in their company name and show the persons in that company, for example.
So you kind of want to filter as you're searching.
Yeah, so maybe you would also search the company name for those persons.
As far as I remember, it uses kind of a structured, well, since it's using Scout, if I remember correctly, it has like kind of that end structure you can put in it, so it has kind of a bit of structure to it, so you could say, name is something and something else is something else, but I can't really tell you anything beyond that. I haven't played enough with it. Yep.
So you mentioned about actions, and earlier you mentioned that there's some sort of logging for every action.
Yep.
You do. Can you show something, if it's possible to see, I guess?
Yep. So them actions aren't really that accessible. I probably shouldn't have closed that tab. But yeah, Laravel Nova uses them kind of internally to manage them queues, and I can demonstrate just kind of what that looks like. If I bring up my database again. Whoop. Don't use it. So yeah, we just have action events, and yeah, you can just say the user who kind of triggered them and the name. So this is more kind of an internal feature. I'm assuming there's probably a package which lets you look at these, but it's basically just kind of like a queue. It's not recording anything crazy. It's just kind of, it's mainly just to make sure they actually run. So yeah, I wouldn't rely on them for any kind of deep reporting or anything. They're just kind of useful, or like stealing the fields that are used for it. Yeah. Any other questions?
You were saying that
the mic police.
You were saying that the cards and the metrics have a cache on them.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's any way to provide like a refresh button where you can physically, just click a button to request a new update on that?
Yeah. Out of the box, I'm pretty sure no. But saying that, you can easily just come in here. Like in this case, this one is actually disabled, but you can change that to whatever you want. And I guess you could conditionally cache things depending on certain parameters, because it's just a function. Yeah. And another important thing is these all kind of have their own URI key. So you won't actually notice that, but the API internally will kind of use them URI keys. It's kind of another advantage of Nova is that it's API based first. So all the front end stuff is Vue.js, and it's using Axios to kind of talk to that API and return data, save data, etc. Yep. Cool. I think we're done.
Thank you, Harlan. Sweet. Thanks everyone for coming. Just lastly, I just want to remind everyone we're looking for speakers. So if you want to speak yourself, please talk to me or to Max. And if you just feel like, I want to know more about this subject or whatever, send us a message. Maybe we can do some research and actually do the talk for you. So let us know. Anything else you wanted to go over? No? Sweet. Thanks everyone. Hope you had a blast.